Welcome everyone to this panel. First panel of the day, emerging from crisis, leaders' perspective on what matters the most. I think the first word of this panel is very, very important, emerging from crisis. As I mentioned in my welcome address, the BFSI sector faced a huge amount of crisis in the last 2 years. Lockdowns happened, movements stopped, and the sector rose to the occasion. And it faced the challenges bravely, and it has come out stronger. So let me start with we are going to have this as a 45 minutes panel. So let me first of all define the times. We are at 10:17, so we can end at most around 11. So I will request Mr. Amit Malik, MD and CEO Aviva India Life Insurance. First of all, him to in next 5 minutes give his views on how the sector has worked out in the last 2 years and how the whole COVID changed the sector in terms of digital adoption and overall customer engagement and overall business has evolved. If you can highlight.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi, and thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. I've traveled from Gurgaon. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for making it early in the morning. I think the penny dropped for all of us was when all of a sudden the world stopped, as I say. One fine day the world stopped and we were confined to the four walls of our room. And before I go on to the sector, I think for me the whole recognition was that it brought the whole conversation about importance of financial planning out in open. I think that was the first step, even as you know the world stopped. People started to realize the importance of their own financial planning, and not only the importance but also the need to understand what encompasses financial planning. So when you look at a BFSI sector, I think there are various elements to financial planning, and insurance is one of them. But I think that whole need came up, and I think that was very good. And why I say that is because a lot of you will realize and be with me when I say that as Indians and as cultural society, we do a very bad job of talking about finances within our families, right? We do not have parents sharing about finances, and we do not have that conversation. So I think that was the first thing. When I look at an industry standpoint, I think industry was already on the path of digitization, whether it was banking, whether it was insurance, whether it was other parts of the investment industry. Banks were far ahead than where the insurance companies were, and we had a lot of catch up to do. But in insurance, what we realized was that, when we talk about digitization, one was to give our customers the whole ability to be able to service their needs from the comforts of their home where they were locked in. But I think the other important part was also how do we educate them to use it. One was to tell somebody you have 5 tools available where you can service yourself or we can help you self-service. The other was also how we build that confidence in education to use those 5 tools, because the customer set was across generations, right from generation Z to generation X, Y to the baby boomers. I think that was important. What also brought the focus in the industry was obviously the faster adoption of digitalization that I said. The second was on how do you look at customer at the center and start to make an ecosystem that just puts the customer and the customer needs at a center, because the customer is not coming to you. You have to go and reach out to the customer. So the customer actually became at the center. Another aspect that came out which was very big was both my presenters spoke about before was cyber security. All of a sudden people realized that there was, while we were going digital, there was push for digital, there was push for self-service, there was also this whole vulnerability about phishing, there was vulnerability about being frauded, and all of these came into being. I think if you look at that campaign, RBI does that campaign very well, saying RBI kehta hai. I think that's a great awareness campaign. Insurance industry also does insurance sabse pehle. We also do that. I think those education of the customer on phishing as a word came into the lexicon of everybody. I think everyone started to realize, whether in the corporates or in an individual world. I will tell you my own personal anecdote. I have an 82-year-old father, And I was talking to him and he was starting to getting those messages which were phishing. So I actually had to sit with him and say, this is not from your bank or this is not from your telecom provider, this is from somebody else. So please do not click on the links, because he had no concept of saying, why would I not click on the link? And if I click on the link, what happens to my phone? So I think those are the conversations that started to happen. Also, I think what the other thing that it brought in was a lot of simplicity into both the process and the products. The companies started to look at simplification of the process. Companies started to look at simplification of the products, which, let me assure you, is not very easy in a regulated industry like BFSI to do that, because again, putting the customer in mind, if you couldn't reach out to the customer physically, you wanted to make sure that your processes and products became very simplified, which was there. And last but not the least I'll touch upon is a lot of innovation happened into it. So I think those are the key thoughts that I have, which I'll set the tone, and we will discuss that, Raviji, as we go ahead.
Thank you, Amitji. And I think one of the important factors you touched about was the financial planning, which was like really important. And second aspect about the cyber security itself, the awareness. And you mentioned about your father and my father, who does not stay with me, but he got phishing attack and he actually lost money, a good amount of money. So it's a common issue, and like cyber security has emerged as one of the most important issues in these COVID times. Let me request Mr. Sojit Roy, who is the MD and CEO of IDBI Intech Limited, that what are the most important issues which emerged in last 2 years, and what matters the most according to you?
So first of all, good morning to all of you. I think, thanks for having me here, and thanks to Dr. Gupta and Malik. They have already talked about many things. I think it was a year which is obvious statement that we had gone through huge challenges of life and livelihood. That's the biggest problem. And, wave 2 was what a massacre of its own kind. It's never happened in a century. So whatever you did, you have to be very clear that you did first time right. And you did not know what was the first time right thing, because it's never happened within a century. So whatever it was a test of agility of an organization, right, you had to make sure that what you do is first time right, and what you do is in a more agile manner. That's very important. And the most important part of this pandemic, what we saw is getting employees trust building exercise. Unless and until you have your employee trust built over them, both for their life and livelihood, I don't think any organization can ever succeed from that point of view. I think pandemic has been one of the blessing, if you see the other side of the pandemic, has been a blessing in digital transformations, right? I think that people talk about, it never happened in a century at a speed at which it happened. And obviously for a reason why it happened, because there was no way to connect with the customers. So for us to connect with the customers, the only way was to have a digital transformation and see the evolving needs of the BFSI sector, which means that right from customer engagement, you had to do onboarding of a customer, like in a banking, you onboard a customer, right? You do KYC, video KYC, and do Aadhaar biometric, and you onboard a customer. Then it came on the omni-channel, the customer experience when you do. The most important is, unless the customer is having a good experience, the business doesn't happen, because physically you are not meeting them. And secondly is that we are all used to meeting each other. And this was a big, gap between meeting and not meeting on a virtual platform. That itself was a mindset for each one of us, right? So that was one thing. And then it transformed into the omni-channel experience, the customer experience, and the customer journey perspective. Second was on the orchestration layer. So the technology was a booming point of view, right? Where you have microservices, the API services, which was talked about once upon a time by a lot of consultants across the globe. It actually is a reality we implemented. And that implementation has to be done within a very short, limited time, because that's where you have to show an output. Gone are the days where you show PPT presentations and all. People needs to know the real-time experience of an application what you have developed, right? That's very important. And the transaction systems where you had, cloud to be deployed. And more important on agility part, where cloud deployment and the fintechs actually also helped in collaborating with us. So the BFSI overall was a collaboration system, collaboration with the ecosystem of fintechs, creating confidence and building trust with your employees, which is very important, because unless they are in this life and livelihood issue, the trust building was also a challenging. I think it helped us a lot. I think the results which you see after the pandemic, I think it was phenomenal. I think BFSI grew very nicely. As an IDB Intech, we had the best performance in last 2 decades of our inception. So we did almost 40% growth in our PAT. So that was the kind of growth we had, 23% growth in our revenue. So this was the highest growth we could ever have from that point of view. And the kind of programs we created, especially we are specialized in the financial crime areas where we have done a lot of agility programs in that. We created a lot of good customer satisfactions. That's all from us.
Thank you. You have mentioned the challenges, and you also mentioned the growth which happened in this sector in last 2 years, which has been massive. Let me reach out to Adesh Manjrekar and ask him that as both our speakers have highlighted that increased penetration of digital has happened in the banking and the overall BFSI sector in last 2 years. The cyber security issues have also increased, and also the usage of clouds and digital assets, fintech, and other aspects have also increased a lot. So how do you see that in the coming years these trends will evolve, and how has the BFSI sector be prepared and be ready to adopt these fast moving changes in the technology?
Thank you. I think excellent question, and I can only give a vendor perspective or a consultant perspective. I think kudos to the leaders here who have enabled their organizations to build the trust with the employees and ensure that their customers are connected. I think I'm just probably echoing Mr. Malik's thoughts on how my mother faced this, this pandemic situation. And an excellent example has been how the bank came to them. So I would think of myself to be quite technology literate and be savvy with the apps and the usage, knowing exactly what not to click. But like Mr. Malik pointed out, like Mr. Roy pointed out, I think the ownership on organizations was extremely important to ensure that the whole spectrum of the users were able to be addressed. If I was savvy with using a phone banking or a net banking or even using the applications, there were elders who were not as used, and they were probably happy with the feature phone. So the smartphone era itself took a time for them to adapt. But I think this pandemic got in, a push, a nudge. But however, organizations ensuring that the entire spectrum of users, consumers were addressed was important. Now, working for a technology company, a giant like Dell Technologies, you would think that we've not had much challenges. But on the contrary, we had to also up our game. I would think that when you talk about vulnerabilities left to security companies, and one of the things that that comes along is there's somebody else taking care of this. There's somebody else who's looking at this. I don't really need to worry. But as we evolve, as Dell Technologies also went into this pandemic phase, all companies went in, we had to also ensure that we adapted to this environment. And one thing that came along is we had to be exposed to our customers virtually. Now, there were a lot of things that were allowed, there were a lot of things that was prohibited. There were security aspects that was taken in. Now, what we saw is there was a trust built in based on certain technologies, based on certain platforms that were available, and this journey was started. We learned as we moved along, and we adapted to it. What came out very, very strongly is that this is not going to stop anytime now. In fact, it has now accelerated our journey. So as we adapt to modern applications, modern environments, we have to look at a holistic way of connecting to our users, to our businesses, to our end customers, and ensure that we have the same degree of depth in our offering. Modern workloads as banks adapted to digitization, the whole world adapted to digitalization, what we've seen is that these workloads have transformed. These workloads have to have security at the center and at the center of it. And one thing that I learned from the earlier presenter, amazing presentation, it puts in a perspective that you always have to have your guards up. Okay, but there is going to be one blow that's going to come maybe when you're caught off guard. And what's your strategy around it? So if you look at the resiliency framework, it just does not talk about how you detect or protect or respond, but you also need to have a plan to remediate or recover from it. And that's where you need to have a plan around it. And at Dell Technologies, our technology offerings have also changed and adapted to these environments. So we are no longer talking the ancient word of backup, which is actually the premise of the whole, but having a holistic approach on where the data protection really fits in. So cybersecurity or resiliency has also adapted to the new modern age data protection requirements, evolving from a backup and archiving perspective.
Thank you, Adesh. You have put this context of the digital adoption so well. And let me request Mr. Amit Malik, who is the MD and CEO of Aviva India Life Insurance, that if you can briefly highlight that what has been the digital journey of your organization in last 2 years. So like if you compare pre-COVID and post-COVID, like how have the things evolved? If you can
Sure.
highlight.
I think it's been very, very transformative. So, if you were to ask our customers, I think they would see a lot of stuff. I think post-COVID, we got this realization and, we've taken this vision to say, why would we want a customer to walk into our branch? Right. While we have branches all across, above 60, but why would we want them to even walk at least a branch? Why can we not fulfill all our customers' needs, which is, from their sofa or from their office or from their bedroom? I think that's been the mindset change that has happened. Let me tell you a small story. I took over as the COO of Aviva in 2018 before my CEO role. And I asked this question once saying, why do we have to have people and month ends work till 12 in the night, 2 in the night? Why can't they do all of this from home? And I was told, oh no, we are a regulated industry. We have underwriting norms and we have to have underwriters in the office and we have to do this and we have to do that. And people will not understand and how will we answer? And lo behold, 27th of March, when the world came to a stop, for us in insurance industry, JFM is our Diwali, Christmas, whatever you call period, right? We do 40% of our business in JFM, and March is critical. The amount of new business and renewals we have on March 29th, 30th, 31st is humongous. And on 27th, the world stopped. So that same question came up saying, how do we now do these 4 days from home? And we did that. And I think that's the mindset change. Today, all my month ends, if they fall on Saturday and Sunday, we just tell the teams to work from home and do it from home, because if we could do it then, and we did it in April and we did it in May, so we could now do it, right? And I think that's the mindset. But that's also been a drastic change from a regulator standpoint. And I want to compliment the regulator. I think the regulator was so proactive in their approach, and they just kept the customer at the center of everything that they wanted us to do. I think that has helped a lot of us bridge that gap. Today, earlier we would have customers who would have to walk in to do their claims, right? In 2018, we introduced a 30-minute claim process where you still had to walk in, but we would settle a claim up to a certain value in 30 minutes. Today, none of my customers have to walk in to submit a claim. So I think that's been the change. So keeping the customer at the center, all the 3 key elements of people, process and technology has brought that change. But the biggest for me is the mindset. This cannot happen or we will be in a breach or this will not happen. I think that whole challenge of ourselves has changed. I think we've now started to ask ourselves to say how best we can do it for our customer, how easy can we make it for them. And if they come to the branch, why would they want to come? I think that's the answer to your question. I hope that answers.
Let me repeat this same question to our next speaker, uh, uh, Mr. Surajit Roy, who is MD and CEO of IDBI Intech Limited. Your digital journey in the last 2 years, and how do you see your organization pre-COVID and post-COVID?
Yeah, thank you. As Amit said, and I said it previously also, the biggest challenge was the mindset of all of us, right? We were struggling for our own lives, forget the business, right? Business secondary, if you, aap zinda rahe, to fir business karoge, right? That's the way people looked at it, and that was the reality, of life. And in that reality, we had to, be more hand-holding with our employees and with our customers. That's what's very important. And the biggest challenge was you did not know what the customer wanted, you were first time imagining, reimagining, sitting on the drawing board, a lot of times, you didn't have means to come to the office. And, in the pandemic, we are a part of the essential services, so we didn't have an option to work from home. So we had to come to the office, so there was no option. So you had to come to the office to ensure that the banking and the insurance sector works, the bank works, EOD or BOD happens on time. So I think we saw a huge digital transformation, especially we identified few areas, and we saw that this can be a move on the digital transformation area, and we selected financial crime as one of the key takeaways of this journey which can see it, right? Because when you do digital transaction, the financial crime is, bound to exceed the limits. And as we saw, and I think that prediction of our iterations among our employees and the customers when we interacted, I think we felt the need that, the financial crime is one area where you could look at. So we created many systems on trade-based money laundering, anti-money laundering, enterprise risk management. The insurance companies today, the biggest ones are looking at risk management as one of the biggest, solutions. So what these solutions meant was a hike up in the technology front. So we used AI/ML, which normally everybody is using, and talked about it. We implemented as a part of our product. We created the product, changes overnight, and obviously it was a mix of developers who were working from home and the operation guy coming to the office and doing it, doing their regular operation. So we had to segregate the teams to see that, because while the customer was on the focus, in the organization, people was the center point for us. And we leveraged technology to support those disruptive technologies, which helped us on AI/ML to gain much more than what it was 2 years back and what it was today. So that helped us to rock the boat in terms of, helping the customers meet their regulatory compliances, because that's what's very important. And Mr. Malik said the regulatory compliance, you must thank that the way they supported, and the government, the way they supported in terms of the regulations and the norms to be relaxed. I think that helped a lot, and we ensured that this new age technology removed people and made operations much more error-free. And those technologies helped us. And now we are seeing the leap bound in the digital transformation area. And then we saw in the payments part. So if you see, the payment reconciliation is another product which we created from a transformation perspective on AI/ML, which also created a huge thing, because sometimes it happens that, you swipe your card on the net banking. Your money is debited, but you actually has not gone to the right guy. So that's a big challenge, right? You anyway have a problem and you created more problem for yourself, your BP is rising. So that kind of problem should not happen when you're sitting at home, you do not know whom to contact, right? So the payment reconciliation, which creates dispute settlements in terms of how this dispute can be, helped. So RBI also came with a regulator saying that every bank needs to settle on T+1 day, the digital transactions. So that was a solution which helped us also to create, and so that the end customers who are doing digital banking, from that point of view, the disputes are settled. So these are some things which really helped us, and we moved the angle. So we got many big transaction volumes coming up, and we did everything remotely. And it is unheard of. You never heard of banks giving VPN connectivity to you, ever, right? You couldn't think of, right? Because there was no option. But it happened, but also it had cyber security challenges, as we all spoke about. I think the mix of people and the technology, mainly the technology, helped us in transforming the businesses what we did. And what we did previous was the traditional part of the business. I think it gave us many ideas of out-of-box thinking for the innovations we needed to create. I think that is one of the key takeaways, I must say, that it helped us, build it. And today we see the productivity of people, the customer interactions, the customer experiences was very important. So while you do digital transformation, your experience with the customer has to be important, otherwise your referenceability is over. So everything had to be done remotely from that point of view. I think it was a good collaboration from all that point.
Great insights from Surjit ji, and I liked his statement that कि अगर जिंदा रहेंगे तो business भी हो जाएगा. So if you like look back in time, it looks like the first wave was the starter, and the second wave was a real thing. And like I was having a conversation with some family and friends meeting after COVID after 2 years, and like we were all discussing achievements of last 2 years, and someone said that कि हम जिंदा हैं यही अपने आप में achievement है. So like that was the extent of this, and in these troubled times, many of the sectors actually transformed themselves, as Aviva, as you mentioned, IDBI, as mentioned, which is a heroic thing. And let me just request each of us in this room to actually give a big claps for ourselves and for the whole BFSI sector for this momentous achievement of like transformation. If you like look at it from like a different point of view कि अगर IT ही नहीं होता तो बैंकिंग सेक्टर रुक जाता, और अगर बैंकिंग सेक्टर रुक जाता तो देश रुक जाता. So like that is the whole extent of this achievement which has happened in last 2 years. So let me come to Adesh again. And Adesh, like each of our speakers has spoken about, like as last speaker talked about VPN, unimaginable, like happening, and employees accessing the sensitive data of the BFSI in homes, unimaginable. All this has happened. So how has the extent of the cyber security the concept evolved in last 2 years? And what is the damage control strategy which is required by the organizations, especially in the BFSI sector?
Great question. I don't know how to answer this. Honestly, I'm not a security expert. But from our experience, I think we learn from our customers. We've seen them pivot around very quickly onto this aspect. The innovation has taken a leapfrog in how they have evolved with their application landscape, their user base, the end functionality. And technology companies such as Dell, because of the extent of the portfolio, we just don't make infrastructure, we make software, we make applications that are getting consumed or are the basis for these IT infrastructure to be brought up. So what we've learned is that cybersecurity or protection has to be thought at every aspect. It just doesn't come at accessing a physical premises. So if you came into this hotel today morning, you had your bags scanned, frisked, you were probably gone through a metal detector just to ensure that you're not carrying anything hazardous. But there was no physical check on whether you are the person that has originally registered until you reach the registration desk, and a name card would suffice. Now think of it, I had to renew my insurance over a phone call, and I would wonder what the rep or what the company had to think through to ensure that they got the renewal from the person before time, and it was the right person insuring it. Somebody could just use my identity credentials, could steal them, and I too had to had that conscious thought process of how safe are my information. I'm giving in my personal information, my unique credentials, which I didn't want to be there in the public domain. Now, as a company, any organization, no matter what industry they are, they have to look at all of these aspects, right? From building the tenets of physical security, building it as an application. As they developed applications, as they developed modern workloads, consume them, they have to think security is at the center of it. And even within our technologies, we have enabled all of these tests right at the manufacturing. So ensuring that you don't have a hardware component that's been compromised because it came from certain location. Okay, how do you ensure that no IP is being stolen? Something which is like if you're installing a software which kind of eavesdrops on your environment network, that's something that you could find out. But what if it's there physically on a hardware or a chip that you can't find out? So we have set up processes to ensure that our products are built in with that kind of security aspect so that you have a trusted platform that you're running on. The other things that have evolved as well is on the way we thought of application security worked. And like my fellow speaker earlier said, that you have to have preparedness for a zero-day kind of attack. We have, from the data protection group, have evolved to say that should that fail, what is your recovery strategy? And we are helping organizations to transform their data protection from a recovery mechanism, creating a vault-like solution to help them recover should such an uneventful event happen. Most organizations today have spent a lot of time, money, human resources to building that protection perimeter, ensuring that there are checks done at all levels. And as a technology partner as well, we have seen that we have to up our game, ensure that we help this onboarding journey for our customers very simplified.
I think Adesh has really summed it up. I just wanted to add, I think the realization has been pre-COVID, a lot of people thought this will not happen to us, this will not happen to me. Today the realization is it is bound to happen, how strong my parameters are, and even if the parameters get breached, God forbid, how soon can I recover? And how strong is my data protection? I think that whole shift in realization has happened. So as I say it in a very simple terms, while I'm not a techie here, is trust in God but lock your car. I think that's the situation that has come today.
You want to comment on this?
Yeah, I think the important part is that, we have to work and we have to have controls, right? So nothing will be 100% secure, right? But we have to live and just see how we can able to resolve that issue on a minimum time frame. I think that's the key part. I think we are all evolving. Nothing is, concrete that 100% is secure. Nobody can guarantee from that perspective. I think what we are doing, we are reducing the probability of, the security issues what we can have and trying to work proactively in that area.
So we are towards the end of this session, and I will request each of the speakers to give their closing remarks, and especially I will request them to talk about the digital transformation they are going to see in the next 3 years. So lot has happened. I think the Satya Nadella has given a comment that the transformation which we were thinking will happen in next 5 years or 10 years, it has actually happened in last 2 years. So how is the next 3 years looking like? Are we done with it? Have we implemented whatever has to get implemented, or is there still a journey to be covered? And if yes, then what it is? What next has to happen?
That's a very long question. We could have had a topic on this, but let me try and sum it up. And you said closing statements should mean 2 minutes, but let me sum it up. Very kind. Now, I think when you, onto the last part of your question first, are we there? I think we are at the tip of the iceberg of seeing what digitization can do, because if you look at it already, I think I'll break it up into 3 or 4 parts. First part is, I think digitalization will now move into virtualization and metaverse. In next 2 to 3 years, virtualization and metaverse will be a integral part of our life. So if you have not adopted it, if you don't know about it, my submission is go and look at the first course on metaverse in wherever free platform you can get, and start learning about it, because that is going to be a reality of their life, that is there. And this will then start to spill in your customer experience. This will then start to spill on the products that you design for your customers. And this will then also start to spill in the talent that you would need to fulfill. So if you were to look at it, every aspect of your business, every aspect of your life will get touched, not only touched, will get hugely impacted by digitization, right? I say that in my organization, if your job doesn't have a digital element, then be very, very worried, because that job will cease to exist. Irrespective of what you do in the organization, right from a call center executive to a CXO to, being in any department of legal, finance, compliance or risk, whatever, to operations. I think every job will have a digital element. So I think that's part. Your customers will demand a lot more of you from digitization and product. The second thing is digitization would start to have an influence on product personalization. In a BFSI sector standpoint, while we will have to personalize the product, that product personalization or hyper personalization, as I see, will start to happen across industries across segments of BFSI industry, and that will be led by digitization in the first part. Data and digitization will play a very, very key role in innovation that the organizations would have to bring. I think those are my thoughts, and not to forget talent. I think you will need to have talent which will have the capability to not only understand but also to deliver against all of these tasks that are there. So I think that's where.
Fantastic. I think I will request Surajit to speak about this.
I think the journey has begun on digital transformation. If you say in one word, India became number one in digital transaction, crossing 25.6 billion transaction over China and US. I think that speaks of a huge thing. We have not only caught up, we became number one from that point of view. And the kind of technologies we are adopting, I think the pace at which India is adopting the technology is far, far ahead than lot many other, developed countries, if you talk about it. I think what we should look at is that one is a, digital transaction, payment transaction, and so on and so forth. I think everywhere, everything is moving to the metaverse. It's a big transition happening, right? Last 20 years, the way we used to do our job, the way we used to look for a job, nothing is going to be some traditional way of doing things. Everything is going to be virtualized. Even for your land purchases, right? It will be on a virtual environment, and that's the way the metaverse is getting defined. You see, Facebook changed its name to Metaverse. From that point of view, that's a big indicator for all of us from that point of view. I think while doing this, it's important that we reskill our employees and we reskill ourselves, right? The learning and unlearning is a very, very important aspect for not only to stay relevant, but also to stay ahead of the curve from others. I think that's very important, not only for employee, as well as for the organizations what you work for. I think the products are getting designed in a very different fashion than what you could ever imagine in the way it is being designed right now. Because everything is a straight-through process. We call it STP, right? And it removes all the processes, but it is foolproof from that point of view, while the security controls are being put in. I think the journey has begun. I think we should spend more time in terms of looking how the innovations can give. And I think the millennial guys who are coming from the college right now, they're also exposed to many things. And the technology, especially in the AI, the BFSI is dominated on AI ML. And I think the next technology which is coming is the blockchain, right? A lot of use cases are getting built up, but still there is not a feasible, in terms of a use case which is working right now. But I think many use cases, many investments are going into the blockchain area. Even the cryptocurrency we talked about, RBI talked about digital assets from that point of view, right? I think those are technology advancements which you need to upgrade and which we'll see very soon are light of the day, which was talked about once upon a time. It is not once upon a time, it is for tomorrow. I think that's the way you should look at it.
So both our speakers have said that abhi to party shuru hui hai, right? So Adesh, your take.
Yeah, I think Mr. Malik and Mr. Roy have been very candid in sharing their vision. On behalf of Dell, I think what we are looking at also is definitely listening to what our customers want and adapt to it. But very important thing both of these gentlemen mentioned was talent. We've got a group of people in the organizations that have had that have been delivering for a certain period of time, doing the things the same old ways, but are on the offense on adapting to the new talent. There has been a consistent change and adaptation in the modern technology, which the millennials are absolutely savvy with. So I know of my nephew who is about 12 years old and who is already talking about coding. He loves it. I wouldn't think I would be the same. If I was the same age, I would have had that kind of energy and keenness. What, as Dell Technologies, we've also been cognizant of is ensuring that while we're doing this modernization, we're adapting to this new tech world, how are we helping the environment? One of our moonshot goals has been focusing the environment. One of the other moonshot goals that has been is having diverse and inclusive workforce, especially women in tech have been get an opportunity to get back and share from their experience being in this domain, having domain level expertise. Dell is helping them bridge back so that there is a good balance of technology acumen as well as industry experience that comes back and helps us, build this ramp up for the Indian economy. So across the industry, we've seen that innovation is right at the top speed. I wouldn't say it's at the top gear, but as we move on to the next level, we will need to have the right workforce, right platforms, and right technology partners to accelerate this journey.
Thank you, all our esteemed speakers. I think we had a great session, great learning. In fact, I have learned so much in this session. So it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here as a moderator, and my gratitude to all our speakers and all our delegates who are here. Thank you so much, and we will end it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all of our esteemed speakers for sharing their perspective on what matters the most, and of course, for putting forth that digitization is the way ahead and it should be at the forefront. Thank you once